Over the last 10 years, I've gone from a broke entrepreneur who was riddled with pressure. I didn't realize it, but I was putting so much pressure on myself, in my business, and my life. And I've been able to transform into a multi-seven-figure entrepreneur who pretty much lives a pressure-free life. Well, in today's episode, I'm giving you the 5 tools that I've used to make that transformation. So keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello. This is another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. And today we're going to talk about pressure. And this was an episode that was brought to me to Mr. Matt Johnson, who's like, hey, we should talk about this. And it was kind of funny because I was thinking about it, and we're in the middle of a launch right now. And I'm affiliate launch for Mr. James Wedmore and his program, Business by Design. And we're spending a good amount of money on it. And I just paid all of my taxes, which was a lot of money. And we're spending a lot of money on ads. And the cost per lead right now is the highest we've ever seen. And Matt's like, we should really talk about it. And we have a lot of money on the line. James does big, huge cash affiliate prizes for first, second, third, fourth, and fifth place. So there's a lot on the line. And he's like, you should talk about how you're managing the pressure. And I said, I love that idea, but I actually don't feel any pressure at all going into this launch. And I said, ironically, or maybe not so ironically, the only time I really feel pressure nowadays in the business is when the period between when I submit all of my income reports and books and all of that stuff to my CPA, and I'm waiting to find out how much I owe in taxes. That's the most amount of pressure that I have inside the business. Because, it could be a lot. You just never know. And I also, back in 2017, found out that I owed a huge amount of money to the IRS that I didn't have on hand. And I was thinking about that, like, and how did I get to a place where that is the only pressure that I feel in my business life, inside of my life? That's the only time I feel pressure. And I know there's a lot of business owners out there, and maybe you're one of them, that feel a lot of pressure when running your business. The pressure to be a good boss, pressure to hit results, to bring in revenue. Maybe you are the sole income provider of your family. A lot of those pressures for me are gone. And I started looking back at how did I get there and what did I do? And I kind of broke down and worked backwards. And I want to share those things with you today. I don't know how long this podcast episode will be, so we'll see. But I just want to kind of go through the different things that I've used and I have done to relieve myself of feeling huge amounts of pressure. So let's start first by identifying 2 types of pressure. As I started to map things out right before this episode, I started to realize there are definitely 2 types of pressures. Number 1 is the pressure on yourself. The pressure on yourself to do good, to do better, to be successful, to hit certain revenue numbers, to not be a failure, a lot of those things. And I think a lot of the pressure that we put on ourselves does come because of society norms. What we've been told is right, what we've been told is wrong, the environments in which we grew up in, how we were educated, a lot of those things. So for example, if you come from a family of really successful people, let's say your parents were millionaires, and let's say that your brothers and sisters are all making $250,000 a year, and you're not, there could be a big subconscious pressure that you put on yourself to be successful because that's what your family does, or you're afraid of the judgment that they will give you if you're not successful. And so the intention of starting your business now becomes, I want to be more successful with them or just as much. and you have this big pressure to hit this expectation, but that expectation has been put there because of your upbringing, or your parents have told you that, or your own insecurities have forced you to be there. When, let's look, for example, if you have a business that makes $75,000 a year profit, and your living expenses are $50,000 a year, and maybe you work 3 hours a week in your business, I would consider that pretty darn successful. You have a lifestyle in which you're working 3 hours a week, and you are making, after all your expenses, your food, entertainment, house, cars, cost you $50,000 a year, you're making $75,000, you're pocketing $25,000 a year in your savings, and you're only working 3 hours a week. I would classify that as pretty amazing life. You could do whatever you want pretty much your entire life. That's pretty much pretty successful. But because of where you grew up, because of what your parents told you, whatever, you have this expectation to hit a certain level, and it creates pressure in your life. So when it comes to pressure in ourselves, we have to really evaluate expectations. And losing expectations, this means other people's expectations, society's expectations, your own expectations that might be there that you didn't even realize were there. And losing attachments to everything. So losing attachments, and I think for me, that's one of the things that stopped the pressure, is I lost a lot of attachments. And what I mean by that is this attachment of having to own my own house. I lost that attachment. And having to go through that experience of living with my in-laws for 4 years really got me to a place of that was okay, and understanding that and being okay with it, facing that fear head on. And I lost complete attachment to having to own my own house. Now, here's the thing. I still want to own my own house. I still want to actually own a second house, but I don't have any attachment to it. And what I mean by that is I care about those things, but I also don't care about those things at the exact same moment. And it's a very hard place to get to, where you have desires or you have ambitions, but if you hit that desire and ambition, it doesn't mean anything. You don't care. It doesn't matter if you don't hit it. It's living in this world of wanting it, but being okay with not having it. And to me, that actually is a great place to operate, because that actually gets you to a place of being that you are now the person who does have those things, because the pressure is gone. You make smart decisions. You operate more powerfully. So losing attachments to how you think things should be, how you think things should go, losing attachments to what you think success looks like, redefining and just losing all attachment. Like, I have a nice house and I literally don't care if I lose it. Do I want to lose it? No. Would I be depressed for the rest of my life if I lose it? No. I would literally, if I lost my house, something happened in the business, I lost my house, we would move in with the in-laws, we would figure something out, move in with friends, whatever. And then I would just rebuild. Like, cool, it's part of my story. Let's just do this. As long as, I have my family with me. And by the way, that's even attachment of always having to have my family by my side. That's an attachment as well. But I think the more we learn to live a life with less attachment to things, people, we operate with a whole nother level of power, a level of power where lower levels of pressure can't exist. And I think that's an extremely tough place to get to for a lot of people. But when you do, and it takes time and it takes practice, and it's going to be an ever growing evolution, like there's always going to be things that you're attached to that you can lose. Like, for example, I have an attachment of being able to see my kids every single day. I have an attachment to that. And I know if I ever lose the ability to do that, there would be a lot of suffering. There'd be a lot of pressure. There is pressure on me to not let that happen. And whether that could happen in a whole bunch of different ways, which we don't have to get into because I don't even want to put that into the universe. But I am well aware that I do have an attachment there, and I have a choice of, do I want to work on losing attachment or not? But when it comes to you, let's look at, where do you experience the most amount of pressure in your life? And then I want you to look at, what type of attachments and expectations are you holding in that arena? That if you worked on losing those, that pressure might start to fade away. That's the first place where I would start. Where's the most amount of pressure? Maybe let's just look at your business. Where's the most amount of pressure that you have and you put on yourself when it comes to business, and what type of attachments do you have, and who put those attachments there? You, society, parents, teachers, friends, family, someone else? And let's work on losing those attachments. Let's learn to get rid of those expectations or those structures of how you think things should go, how you think things should look. You will, and the conditions that we put on ourselves too. I will only be happy when I do X, Y, and Z. I will only be happy when this launch does X, Y, and Z. I will only be successful when I hit this amount of money. I will only blah, 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 blah. So conditions, expectations, attachments, we want to lose them all. And that's the one thing that I've learned. And as some of you know, I've worked with a shaman for the last 5 or 6 years. Some of the hardest work that I've done while working with him is losing those types of attachments. And I guess I haven't given myself enough credit for losing the attachments and expectations that I have had, because I didn't realize, and I had a lack of gratitude until Matt brought it up, of how pressure-free my life has become. And it's gone to that place because of losing attachments, expectations, and conditions. They talk about unconditional love. Unconditional love is not when you treat me right or talk to me right, then I will love you. It's I will love you no matter what. Unconditional. So if we can have unconditional operations going on inside of our head and inside of our business, we start to operate with a lot less pressure. But there is a different type of pressure. And as I was talking to Matt about this, he kind of brought it up to my attention. Is like a lot of people have this idea of, or not idea, but they experience pressure because of others. Like, I don't want to let my team down. I don't want to do X, Y, and Z, or this person's depending on me. And I have felt those pressures in the past. I have felt the pressures of, I don't want to let my team down. I don't want to let my family down. But again, even that comes from expectations and conditions. I'm the provider of the family. I need to make sure my kids have a roof over their head. That's an attachment. That's an attachment or to a structure that you think that things should look a certain way. And when they don't look the certain way, or that certain way is threatened, then all of a sudden the panic shuts in, and the pressure is piling on top of you because you're not okay with all scenarios at all times. You're not wanting something, but being okay if it doesn't happen at the exact same time, which is, again, it's a powerful place to operate, but it can be hard. So what I want to do, because I have been able to lose a lot of pressures on myself, but also the pressure of other people has actually faded pretty much out of my life as well. And I want to talk about 5 different tools that I've used in order to get to that place. Like, how do we start to lose the attachment? How do we start to lose the conditions and the expectations and certain things like that? So there's 5 ways that I kind of thought about this, and I have gone about this. Number 1 is I'm going to talk about the people that you have in your life. And I think that one of the reasons why the pressure of making sure everyone around me is taken care of and I can't let them down is pretty much gone out the window. Now, I want to be very clear. I still want that. I still strive for that, but I am 100% okay if that doesn't happen. Okay. So I don't want you to look at this and go like, well, Brandon doesn't care about taking care of his employees and his family. No, that's like my number one goal. My number one goal in my business is to make sure that my employees are happy and taken care of. And the people in my life, friends, family, kids, my kids are taken care of. They get all the things that they need. My wife is taken care of, right? Those are the most important things in my life. But if they don't happen, I'm not beating myself up over it. Therefore, the pressure doesn't build to make sure it's a reality, right? So I'm operating without the pressure. Now, one of the things, and you have complete control over this, one of the ways that makes this so much easier is by deciding who is in your life and who is not. One of the easiest ways to control this, and what I mean by this is I didn't realize this, but one of the things that I've realized is I have a lot of ride or dies, what I would call ride or dies inside of my business. My wife, ride or die. Her and I are taking on the world. We're in it together, ride or die. We've been together since we were 15, 16 years old. I don't want to do life with anybody else. I want to do life with her. She's my ride or die, which also means that I don't care if we are living under a bridge or we are living at someone else's house, and she doesn't either. We don't care. We both have lost that attachment, which means I don't feel the pressure from her to have to build some type of life. We're both totally fine because we've both done work on losing attachments and expectations and conditions. And we put our priorities and stuff in the right place. Now, again, not 100% of the time, but way often more than not. And when I look at my employees, especially the ones that are like our executive team, like Matt and Taylor, like I've had conversations with them of like, hey guys, if like something ever happened, we had a really bad launch and I couldn't pay you for a couple paychecks, or I said we had to do a pay cut, like would you guys be willing to do that? And they said 100%, both of them without hesitation, 100%, because they're in it with me, number one, but they're behind the mission. And this is the work that we're doing, at least my perspective on it, the work that we're doing to them is a little bit deeper than the money. It's more about waking up every day and enjoying your life, not sitting there going, oh my God, I got to do this today, but enjoying the work and the people that you're with. And they both, at least I don't want to speak for them, but I've had conversations where they're like, we're in it for the long run, the long haul. And when you have a team and employees like that, it definitely takes the pressure. Again, I don't ever want to get to the business to a place where I'm like, hey, we can't pay you or we got to do a pay cut or any of that stuff. And I want to give more to my team. And that's what I always strive for. But having the pressure taken off of me of like of just knowing my team's not going to, like, if I say I have to give you guys a pay cut, they're not going to be like, I quit and I'm out of here and leave me with a pile of crap, you know, like a big flaming boat to deal with on my own. Ride or dies, right? So surrounding yourself with the right people will help take so much of the pressure off inside of your life and your business. Now, look, you're the only person that can do your own internal work. You're the only person who can lose your own attachments and your own stuff. But if you work and you support the people around you so that they lose their attachments and their expectations and you help with their happiness level, and you create a business and an environment and a culture where those people want to be there for the long run, well, it becomes a lot easier. So a lot of people focus on like, I need to build more money and make more blah, 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 whatever. If you want that, that's fine. But when it comes to building a business and a team, I think if you focus more on creating a culture that attracts the right people that will help take the pressure off, that's a bigger focus. But again, don't put pressure on yourself to build this amazing culture. Again, it's about losing attachments and all of that stuff. But also just having that support, right? So having that support around you. And when I was building my business, having the support of my wife of being like, yes, you can do this and go do that. And I'm okay where we're at. Having that helped take the pressure off. Okay. So support, the people around you can help take the support off. Even though it's an internal thing, it definitely is a lot easier to get there internally when the external environment and the people you're around are not putting that much pressure on you. Again, even if they're putting pressure on you, that's still you letting them put pressure on you, but whatever. It just is a lot easier if you can get to a place where the people around you are very supportive and you focus more on having that ride or die relationship with people. Number 2 is framing things before you get into it. I think another reason why I don't have a lot of pressure on me is before we do anything big and major. So before we go into a launch, before we go into, like, maybe my wife and I are like, you know, buying a house or something like that. Before we go into any big environment or situation where I could be putting pressure on myself, I have to make sure the framing of everything is correct in my head. And what I mean by that is knowing what I want, knowing what we're aiming for, but framing worst case scenario as a good thing. If we went into our last launch where I spent $250,000 on ads, I need to frame the loss of $250,000 in ads as a good thing, because no matter what the situation is or how it turns out to be, there's always a positive, optimistic spin on it. And this is a very, very incredibly powerful thing to do, because no matter what happens, there's always a great outcome, a great perspective. So getting your perspectives, getting your framing already in alignment, in the right place before you go into any situation, both in business, personal life, whatever, is amazing, amazing thing. So for me, I'm 37 years old, having lived a life where I feel like I've had more experiences than the average 37-year-old. Having a lot of experiences has helped me get to that place as well, because I've also experienced things like being in debt, living with my in-laws, having failed launches. And I see the beauty in that. I see the benefit in all of that. And I see how when things don't work out, there's always a reason, and it generally always leads you to something better. Always. Almost like I haven't found a situation where that hasn't been true in my life. And because of that experience, it's very easy for me to frame things. If I'm trying to like put a bid and an offer on my dream house, and I go into that situation knowing if I don't get it, and I have this optimistic outlook of like, there will be something better. I know there will be something better, but you know what? I'm going to put all my energy and effort and manifesting power into getting this house. I'm going to go for it, but also knowing whatever is meant to be will be, and being 100% okay with that. And if we got the house, great. And if we didn't get the house, then let's move on to the next one. There's no pressure on, I need this, I need to get it, blah, 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 because my perspective and framing was in the right place before we had gone into that situation. It allows you to preset optimism into your mind before you have to do it in the moment. It's already done for you if you do that before. Number 3 is actually the same thing. It's making sure you have the right perspective on things. And when I wrote this one out, what I meant on perspective was really even around money, and making sure that your team and you have the right perspective on goals, making sure that you have the right perspective on everything, not making money your master, not making every decision all based on money, looking at has the perspective that you have on life, the reason why you're doing things, has that been told to you through society, or is it something that you actually want? I look back and I think, again, I've had more experiences than the average 37-year-old. Sure, there's people that are 37 that have way more experiences than me, but I look back in my entrepreneurial journey. I've been doing this for 10 years. I look back and I look at all the things that I put pressure on myself for. This post has to be out today. This email has to be responded now. I can't let this person down. I have to have a great launch. I look at all those things. I shouldn't be in debt. I looked at all of those things and I'm like, wow, I went through all of those and I'm here. I am here today. I did it. None of those things stopped me from seeing success. None of those failures, none of those things I put pressure on myself for, none of those things stop me from getting here. And moving forward, any things that I'm putting my pressure on myself for, they're not going to stop me from getting to where I want to go. They just won't. And I look back and I'm like, that's 100% true. No matter what you went through or what you thought was important and what you were putting pressure on yourself for, whatever any of that stuff was, it didn't matter because you're still here. It didn't matter how low you got or how high you went, you are here. Everything always ends up being okay. And if we know and we truly believe that everything ends up being okay, then why are we putting pressure on ourselves for anything? Again, this is constant work. I have pressure every time I pay taxes. So there's still internal work for me to do there. Again, this is an evolving thing that will never stop, most likely. But having the right perspective on things, knowing that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Like I look back now and I remember putting pressure on myself of like, I got to upload a video every single Tuesday onto YouTube because people need to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it put pressure on myself. And I look back and I'm like, if I would have skipped a Tuesday and just gone and had fun, it would not have delayed me getting here at all. I remember in 2018, we didn't do any of the traditional things that people tell you to do in business. Email your list once a week with value-adding content, blah, 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 all this stuff. Be consistent. We didn't do any of that stuff. And at the time, that was our most successful revenue-generating year. It got me out of that debt that I was in. And I didn't do the traditional stuff that people tell you to do. And that traditional stuff puts pressure on people because people think that's the only way that you are able to do something. The only way to grow a business is by following the same advice that we all have. No, You guys get to create whatever you want to create. You get to do it however you want to do it. If something doesn't sit right with you, you can still be successful by doing it your way. There isn't a standard. There isn't a structure to any of this. The only time we have those things is because we have an illusion in our head. We've been told, we've been indoctrinated into these things that have told us this is the way it's supposed to be, and we put pressure on ourselves to fit within that realm. So perspective. So let's just recap where we're at. I have 2 more tools. But number 1 was having the right support around you definitely makes it easier to get to those internal places. Number 2, framing things before. And actually what I want to do is that there's one point I left out there. Let me talk about that real quick. Framing things before and then getting your perspective in the right place. So let's go back to number 2 real quick before we move on to number 4. Number 2, one of the things we've done with goals that I think has been very helpful, and I've talked to James about this, Wed more about this as well. I think one of the things we've done with goals is people set goals within a team and a culture, and there's a lot of pressure on the team to hit that goal. And then if you don't hit that goal, then you feel like a failure. We messed up. We didn't hit our goal. And that's a very dangerous place to be. And the reason why is because if you did let's call it a $500,000 launch, and then you set a goal for 1.5 million, and then you do $1 million launch, you didn't hit your goal. Are you a failure? No, you just doubled your best launch ever. And you put this pressure on yourself to hit that goal, and then you didn't hit it, and you live in this misery, this suffering, this BS. Even though you doubled your best launch, it doesn't make any sense. So what we've done with goals is we got the framing correct before we head into a launch. For me, as long as we're making progress, then our launch is a success. Even if we did $1 more, we are a success. Even if revenue-wise, we did less, but my team grew as individuals. They found out more about themselves. They found more internal peace and happiness. They were proud of themselves. They did things that they didn't do. They grew. That's still a success. As long as we're seeing progress, we're still seeing success. And here's the thing. You can still see progress with quote unquote revenue failing launches. They're learning lessons. So for us, we live the be, do, have model. We want to do a $3 million launch. So let's think about how do we need to act, be, think. What does a $3 million launch team look like and do? Let's do that, but let's make sure we're not measuring success by hitting that goal. We're measuring success by progress, growth in personnel and growth in revenue. As long as we're hitting one of those, then we're good. If we hit both, great. So that goes back to framing things before. There's always, no matter what happens, there's always going to be a positive outcome, which is why perspective is really important. So number 1, having the right team around you. Number 2, framing things before big events, having the right perspective on certain things. And number 4, which is going to help with the right perspective and framing things before, is knowing that you're always going to get the knowing that no matter what happens, you're always going to get some kind of benefit from it. When I go into a launch and it doesn't turn out the way I want it to do, or let's say my business goes completely under and I lose my house and I lose my cars and I lose the business and whatever, I am left with a massive amount of knowing of how to grow and start a business, how to start and grow a team, how to hire, how to market, how to use messaging, how to sell things online. I can always start over, and I don't need to start the 10-year journey over. I've already gone through that 10-year journey. I can take that 10-year journey and do it in one. I can always rebuild. So no matter what happens, a failed launch, whatever, it's always leaving me with a deeper sense of knowing, and that knowing will always allow me to rebuild faster. When you truly understand this, the pressure to do anything in your life is completely gone, because you can't lose anything. Let me rephrase that. You can't lose the knowing. You can lose the material things. You can lose the house. You can lose the cars. You can lose people in your life, but you will never lose the knowing. And so many people let pressure stop them from getting the knowing because they're afraid. But the knowing is the thing that is allowing you to take the pressure off. Because when you truly understand and see and value the knowing of what you're doing, there should be no pressure, because you can always regain everything that you lost. And number 5, and the final one, is treating your business like a machine. Now, this one took me a long time to understand. This is more for business pressure. I always thought for the longest time, things need to be the way that I envisioned them to be, or the way I wanted, or that I would do things better, or that I had to do everything. And that put in a huge amount of pressure to get everything done all the time. But when you start to treat your business like a machine, it takes a huge amount of pressure off. So in order to take pressure truly off of you and your business, there's a couple ways to do it, as hopefully you guys are seeing. Number one is the way you frame things and look at things and your perspective in your life. Number two, there's these tools like external things that make it easier to take pressure off, like having a team that does a lot of things better than you could have, that streamlines it, but also having the right people in place. Technically, you could have a business that's out of whack and still not feel any pressure because you just lost that attachment. But I'm telling you right now, just like having the right people, the right ideas in your business, in your life and in your business, that can help you get to that internal state a lot easier. Running your business like a machine can help you get to that state a lot easier as well. Like right now, I don't have the pressure of posting to social media that our posts have to be here and here and here. It's not even on my plate. It's not even on my radar. I literally don't even know if we posted anything on social media today. I just know that it's getting done. There's no pressure there because my team is running the business like a machine. We have structure in place. We have the right team in place. We have the right hierarchy in place. We have people in the right place in the business. We're starting to build out even more SOPs. We have KPI-based roles now. Like we have responsibility attached to every position. There's structure. We're starting to run the business like a machine, and it takes all these little things off my plate. And I put the responsibility on the team. Brittany, for example, runs her podcast. She's responsible for making sure that things get posted. She's responsible for the growth. Who else? Taylor, an integrator, our COO. She's responsible for running the business efficiently, for our systems, for our processes, making sure that things are done on time, implementing the strategies. I'm not responsible for that. I'm here to help and mentor and lead. That's her responsibility. Same thing with Matt. He's responsible for our content team, the content side of the business, he's our creative director, our chief creative officer. He's make the content up to date. That's getting the teams running efficiently. There's enough content for the team, working with the social media. He's responsible for all those things. I'm not responsible for those things. And when we start to give the responsibility and delegate to our team and teach them to do the same thing as we start to grow, we start to relieve a lot of pressure to have to do everything. And because of that lack of pressure, I'm able to focus on content or the things that I enjoy. My life is much more enjoyable. So when we go into a launch, it also helps too, because I'm not responsible for making sure our ads are working and our ads are converting. Our ad manager and Taylor and people are responsible for the strategy. They're responsible for it, right? And I trust that they will get it done. And if they don't, guess what? I have the right framing in my head where it's like, if it doesn't work out, it's okay. It's going to be fine. There's going to be a benefit there. Everything is optimistic. Everything is benefit driven. There's no cynicism. Is that the right word? Cynicism? Is that the right word? I'm having a brain fart.
Yeah. Is that what you're trying to say? There's no cynicism?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word.
It sounds weird. I feel that sounds weird. It didn't sit on my tongue well. But anyways, all of that is gone. And again, these are very simple concepts that are actually very hard or can be very hard to implement because it will require a lot of unlearning, unwinding, unraveling things that have been there for me 37 years, for you, however old you are, that are habits, subconscious things that you got to constantly be aware of. So you're stopping an automation that's been there for years, and that's not always the easiest thing to do, but that is basically how over the last 10 years I've been able to go into a launch where we're spending, I don't know, anywhere from probably around $70 to maybe $100,000 in ads. After paying over 6 figures in taxes recently and like going through all that, I'm living this launch with very little pressure is because of the concepts I just talked about with you today. So just to recap real quick before we end this episode, there's two types of pressures, one that you put on yourself and one because of others. The tools that I've used to help myself with this is supporting and putting myself around the right people and encouraging them and helping them find optimism and happiness and get their internal state and building a culture or an environment where people actually want to be there. And that way the pressure to keep them and the worry about not losing them is kind of out of the window. Number two, framing things before you enter a major situation that you know is going to cause a lot of pressure. Just let go of attachment, let go of conditions, let go of expectations, and frame everything as a positive thing. Number three, the right perspective. So have the right perspective in the middle of doing it as well, because sometimes you can snap out of, even if you frame it before, you still want to maintain the right perspective all the way through. Things could happen and could knock you out of that framing. Number four, always know that you're getting the knowing no matter what, which means you can always get yourself back to where you are. And then number five is to make sure you run your business as a machine if you're trying to take business pressures off of yourself. But more importantly, the big lesson here is to make sure that if you feel a pressure in your life, to look at why that pressure is there. What type of expectation do you have? What type of structure do you have? What type of attachment do you have? And start to lose those attachments, lose those structures, lose those conditions. And you can still want those things, but also be okay with not having them at the exact same time. And that is the key. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. What I would love for you to do is to share your biggest breakthrough or aha inside our Facebook group, the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast, or just on Instagram and tag us at I am Brandon Lucero. And if you haven't done so yet, I would absolutely love for you to head over to iTunes and leave us a great review there if you enjoyed this podcast. And that's it. So we'll see you guys on the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.